You've been restructured, Damon said, sliding the termination letter like a poker chip across the desk. I didn't speak. I didn't blink. Because what they just called a restructure, I had been preparing to dismantle from the inside. My name is Patrick Greer. I'm 59 years old, and until exactly 11:08 a.m. on a cloudy Thursday, I was senior financial controller at Northmere Dynamics, the kind of company that used to value loyalty before the shark smelled venture capital. 19 years. That's how long I kept the bones of that place from snapping under its own ambition. 19 years of missing birthdays, skipping anniversaries, and pouring myself into spreadsheets like they were lifelines. After my wife passed, the silence at home became unbearable. So I stayed late. I volunteered for audits no one wanted. I became the guy who made sure every decimal was where it should be. And I never asked for more than a clean ledger and a bit of respect. But respect isn't scalable, apparently, and neither is loyalty. Back when I joined, it was still a family-run business. Harold Northmere, the founder, used to walk the production floor before his morning coffee. "Numbers don't lie, Patrick," he'd say. "People do. Your job is to make sure our numbers tell the truth." I never forgot that, even when his son sold the company. Even when the new board started pushing those shiny buzzwords, efficiency, optimization, cost-cutting, they called it evolution. I called it erosion. Julia came in 3 years ago as CFO, all sharp blazers and sharper smiles. Her job, unofficially, was to trim the legacy costs. That meant people like me, people who remembered when this place stood for something other than margins. Damon followed shortly after, chief operations, but really just Julia's cleanup guy. I saw the pattern early. Anyone who questioned the new direction got sidelined. One by one, my colleagues disappeared behind closed doors and never came back out. But I stayed. I adapted, or at least that's what they thought. Truth is, I saw it coming long before they slid that termination letter across the desk. And while they were playing corporate chess, I was writing the damn rulebook. I knew every shell company, every ghost vendor, every inflated invoice. I didn't just manage the numbers. I watched the shadows they cast. They thought I was just another outdated employee. What they didn't know was that I'd become their most dangerous liability. I joined Northmere back when payroll still ran through paper slips, and the vending machines still gave change. There were 38 of us, total. We had one server room that overheated every July and a filing system so manual it made librarians nervous. But it worked, because we cared. Harold used to say, "Build it right the first time and it lasts." That became my compass. I automated our reporting process, reduced vendor errors by 80%, and uncovered a 6-figure leak in procurement that saved our fiscal year. But no one put up a banner. That wasn't how we operated. Wins were quiet, sustainable. Then came the transition. Harold's retirement, the buyout, the suits. Suddenly, the culture changed. Morning huddles became dashboards. Trust got replaced with KPIs. But I held the line, for a while. I trained the new hires, rewrote the manuals, and made sure the foundation didn't crack beneath the strategic pivots. Because beneath the politics, the company still beat with a heartbeat I recognized. Until it didn't. It didn't happen all at once. It never does. At first, it was just small things. Meetings I used to lead became meetings I wasn't even invited to. Reports I prepared with precision were now reviewed by interns who couldn't tell a balance sheet from a menu. They gave my desk to someone named Austin, a finance optimization consultant fresh out of a 2-day onboarding. Said I'd be more comfortable down by the copy room. They called it a workspace refresh. I called it exile. Then came the real insult. They hired a junior analyst, Mallory, to help alleviate your workload. She was 24, bright-eyed, social media fluent, and absolutely clueless. But she checked the boxes. Cheaper, younger, compliant. She called me Mr. Greer like I was her grandfather. I called her spreadsheet a fire hazard. At one point, I caught Julia glancing at me during an executive briefing. That look, I'd seen it before. The same look I gave old office printers when they jammed one time too many. like she was calculating the cost of keeping me versus the cost of getting rid of me. And still, I stayed. Not because I didn't know, but because I did. They thought I was slow to notice. But I wasn't slow. I was strategic. Every canceled audit, every misallocated fund, every temporary budget reallocation, I saw it. Documented. Quietly. Because while they were replacing me with hashtags and optimism, I was collecting leverage. They were trading expertise for enthusiasm. And I knew how that story ended. The first signs were subtle, at least to them. Vendor payments started bouncing back. Reconciliations didn't match. The finance dashboard, that glossy, overpriced software they implemented after I was relieved of operational duties, began showing red where there should have been green. Mallory panicked. Austin blamed it. Julia blamed everyone but herself. They didn't know the systems like I did. I built them, secured them, hid the redundancies like safes inside safes. Every policy they ignored. I had mirrored on a flash drive every financial anomaly they created. I had already tagged and time-stamped with copies off-site. Then came the email. Hi Patrick, hope you're well. Quick question about vendor alignment logic for last quarter's reconciliation. No greeting, just a subject line, like I was still part of their ecosystem. I didn't respond. A few days later, a call from Damon. I let it ring. He left a voicemail about some compliance matter and a request to just pick your brain for a moment. I didn't return it. They'd made their decision. So I made mine. Let them feel it. Let the cracks spread. Let them scramble, pull, report, schedule emergency briefings. Let them try to reverse engineer the man they discarded. I wasn't angry. I wasn't emotional. I was methodical. Because when they locked me out, they didn't realize I still held the keys. It started with a message on LinkedIn, one of those you almost delete without reading. Subject line: Coffee? The sender? Rachel Connors, CFO at Langston Industries, one of Northmere's oldest competitors. We'd crossed paths before, back when Langston still respected process over performance theater. She'd heard about my departure, the restructure. She didn't ask for details, just said, I believe in legacy systems, especially the ones that were built to last. We met for coffee in a quiet spot away from downtown. No suits, no PR team. Just two professionals who understood the weight of what was unsaid. I told her enough. Not everything. Just enough to make her lean back and say, well, that's not a story I'd bet against. 2 weeks later, her offer landed. A real one. Not a consulting gig, not a band-aid. She wanted me to build again, from scratch. Not to optimize what already existed, but to lead a department they were rebuilding after a financial misstep exposed the need for, well, me. And as fate would have it, that misstep, it had Julia and Damon's fingerprints all over it. Their attempt to expand Northmere's portfolio had backfired, disastrously. Turns out the consulting firm they used was blacklisted by several international vendors. Something I would have caught in 10 minutes, Marion, if they hadn't pushed me out. That same week I received another email. Julia again. More desperate this time. Patrick, urgent. We're facing a regulatory inquiry related to the vendor structure you previously managed. Can you spare some time to help us clarify a few things? She even attached a calendar link. I didn't click it. Instead, I forwarded the message to my private legal counsel, with attachments. All the documentation I'd gathered over the past 3 years, every shady transfer, every irregular payment, every digital breadcrumb they thought I hadn't noticed. Then I wrote my own email. To the compliance board. Attached, a report, 173 pages, clear, chronological, unforgiving. I never said a word to Julia. Not a threat, not a warning, just action. Langston welcomed me like someone who'd been seen, not as a relic but as a force. My new office wasn't in the basement. It had windows, with light, and respect. I met my new team, hungry, talented professionals who wanted mentorship, people who didn't flinch when I spoke, who didn't check their phones during meetings, who listened. And here's the best part. Langston had just outbid Northmere on 3 major accounts I knew inside and out. Because I'd built the pricing models. I knew their vulnerabilities, their blind spots, their noise. Now, I was the signal. They fired me thinking I was disposable. Turns out I was irreplaceable. Just not for them. By the time the quarterly earnings dropped, it was too late. Northmere's numbers didn't just dip, they nosedived. Missed projections, client attrition, compliance flags, the kind of red you don't fix with a rebrand. Damon disappeared from LinkedIn overnight. Julia went radio silent. And the shareholders? Furious. What they didn't understand, what they never understood, was that I wasn't the one holding them back. I was the one holding them up. Inside sources told me they'd hired 3 external auditors in under a month. None of them could make sense of the financial architecture, because it wasn't architecture anymore, it was rubble. The internal software updates they rushed after my departure had corrupted half the vendor data. Critical payments were frozen. Department heads were pointing fingers at each other while the board scheduled emergency calls at 2 a.m. Then came the legal notice. My lawyer forwarded it to me. Northmere's legal counsel claimed I had violated confidentiality agreements and damaged proprietary systems. They threatened court, sanctions, financial penalties. I smiled because I had documentation for everything, timestamps, emails, even screenshots of requests they'd made and ignored long before they cut me loose. If they wanted a courtroom, I was ready, but I knew they didn't. It was all bark, no bite. A week later, they retracted everything, no apology, just silence. Meanwhile, Langston was thriving. We'd just secured a massive logistics contract I knew Northmere was chasing for months. Their proposal never even made the shortlist. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. You see, revenge, real revenge, doesn't shout. It just shows up in the numbers. And for once the numbers were on my side. I didn't have to dig. The truth came to me. Langston's legal team, thorough as they are, flagged something unusual while auditing a recent acquisition tied to Northmere's consulting contracts. A name popped up that hadn't surfaced in their filings. Lyle Brenner, a shell account manager, offshore, linked to a compliance consultancy that billed Northmere over $2.3 million across 18 months for services that didn't exist. Guess whose digital signature was on those authorizations? Julia's. Guess who approved the wire transfers? Damon. The moment I saw the files, I knew this wasn't incompetence. It was a scheme, a long game. They weren't just cutting costs, they were bleeding the company dry, and I was in the way. Remember those canceled audits? Those missing vendor forms? The forced terminations under the banner of efficiency? It was all designed to remove people like me, people who could see what was really going on. I handed everything to Langston's attorneys, and they did what I never could while still inside Northmere. They escalated it. First to the financial, conduct authority, then to federal investigators. And just like that, the quiet hum of retaliation became a thunderstorm of consequences. I watched it all unfold from a distance. Subpoenas, depositions, anonymous whistleblower hotlines lighting up, former employees coming forward, some angry, some ashamed, all confirming what I had lived through, that Julia and Damon weren't just restructuring the company. They were dismantling it for profit. The final blow came when Julia's emails were leaked, not by me, but through a data breach from a disgruntled intern she'd once berated in front of an entire floor. One message in particular made headlines across finance blogs and industry sites. Greer is too old school. We'll phase him out cleanly. He won't push back, these guys never do. They underestimated the wrong man. Calls started coming in, reporters, former execs, even some of the same board members who'd once nodded through my dismissal without looking up from their espresso shots. They all wanted the same thing now, my version. But I didn't give interviews. I didn't chase headlines. I didn't need a microphone. I had the truth, and the truth had finally caught up with them. That day, I got a message from Kyle, the same security guard who walked me out on my last day at Northmere. He said, "They're cleaning out Julia's office. Damon's too. Corporate is calling it executive restructuring." You were right, sir. I just thought you should know. I stared at the message for a long time, not because I needed the validation, but because it confirmed something deeper. I hadn't been paranoid. I'd been prepared. I didn't want to build another empire. I just wanted to build it right this time. Langston gave me the freedom Northmere never could. No layers of bureaucracy, no political landmines, just clarity. I was handed a clean slate and asked one question: what do you need to build a system that lasts? And this time I had an answer. I hired smart. People who weren't just impressive on paper, but principled. I brought in Miguel, a soft-spoken genius from an NGO who could build a ledger out of spaghetti code. Hired Clara from a competitor that burned her out, gave her space to breathe and create again. I called back Leah, my old assistant from Northmere who used to catch errors before I even saw them. She didn't hesitate. The culture we built, it didn't run on fear or hierarchy. We worked in pods. We shared wins. We corrected quietly, praised loudly. I implemented a mentorship system where the newest analyst could sit with the most senior exec and reverse shadow, because knowledge isn't a ladder, it's a circle. And you know what? People noticed. Vendors started calling us to offer partnerships. Clients extended contracts without negotiation. We didn't need aggressive pricing or glossy decks. We had results, real ones, clean books, on-time delivery, reputation. One afternoon, Rachel, the CFO who first believed in me, stopped by my office. "You've built a culture in 6 months that most companies can't buy in 6 years," she said. "People want to work here because you're here." I nodded, a little overwhelmed. It wasn't the compliment, it was the truth in it that hit me, because for so long I'd been treated like a liability, a relic, a number on a cost-cutting spreadsheet. But here, I wasn't overhead, I was foundation. There was no fanfare, no viral LinkedIn post, just quiet progress. That's how I liked it. Some nights I stayed late, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I'd look out over the bullpen and watch my team laugh, argue over dashboards, pass around takeout containers during crunch time. It reminded me of the early days, but better, cleaner, honest. And maybe that's what respect really looks like. Not applause, not plaques, but people choosing to follow you when they don't have to. The email came on a Tuesday morning. Simple subject line: exploratory conversation, strategic integration. The sender? Harold Northmere Jr. It took me a second. I hadn't seen that name in years. He was the one who sold the company, the one who handed the keys to the same private equity wolves who nearly bled it dry. Now it seemed he'd been pulled back in, or maybe pushed after the board finally realized the iceberg was closer than it looked. The message was diplomatic, full of corporate fluff. But one line stood out: "We're considering unifying our legacy divisions under a new leadership structure. We believe your experience and vision could be instrumental." I didn't answer right away. For years I'd imagined this moment, walking back into that building not as the discarded relic, but as the one holding the map. But now that it was real, it didn't taste like revenge. It tasted like clarity. When we met, they tried to steer the narrative: performance realignment, opportunity for redemption, collaborative synergy. I let them talk. Then I asked one question: how much of this are you willing to rebuild from scratch? They blinked. Because they thought I'd want payback, but I wasn't here for ego. I was here for standards. I made my terms clear. Non-negotiable, no phantom consultants, no cutting corners for short-term margin fluff. My people, my process. Transparency, full, brutal, and immediate. Harold Jr. looked at me and said, "You'd have final say?" I nodded. "Or no deal." He agreed. But here's the twist. I didn't walk in like a savior. No speeches, no flex. I brought Leah with me as head of compliance. Miguel took over systems. Clara built the structure from the ground up. I was there to orchestrate, not dominate. The team that once dismissed me now watched closely, silently, carefully, like they couldn't figure out how I did it. But there was no secret. I didn't take power to own it. I took it to guard it, to make sure the culture we built at Langston could stretch further, and maybe even fix the mess we once called home. This time, it wouldn't be about patching holes. It would be about building something that didn't leak. The first day back felt surreal. Same building, same marble lobby, same flickering light above the elevator that nobody ever bothered to fix. But everything had changed, and nothing Tina changed. I didn't arrive in a black car. No entourage. Just me, a reusable coffee mug, and a leather portfolio that had survived 2 firings, 3 CEOs, and 1 quiet revolution. The receptionist was new. She didn't know who I was, that's how you know time passed. But Kyle, the security guard who once walked me out, was still there. He looked up, then stood a little straighter. "Welcome back, Mr. Greer." I smiled. Patrick's fine." He nodded, but his eyes said more. Respect. Real this time. I walked those halls again, now as Director of Financial Integrity, with oversight over 2 divisions and a seat at the real table. People didn't cheer. No one clapped. But there was something even louder than applause. Silence, focus, stability. The kind of atmosphere where good work gets done without fear. Austin was long gone. Mallory now worked under Clara, and from what I'd heard was finally learning what spreadsheets actually meant. Julia and Damon, not even a nameplate left behind. Ghosts in systems I had rewritten from the ground up. But I didn't gloat. I didn't remind anyone of what they'd done because that was the point. When you build things right, when you lead by example, not by ego, you don't need revenge. You don't need to scream, you just keep showing up, quiet, sharp, unshakable. I passed by my old office, the one I'd been relocated from during their little purge. It was now a break room, figures. I didn't take it back. I chose a corner workspace by the window. Natural light, small whiteboard, 1 photo of my late wife, no nameplate, no throne. Because I wasn't there to prove anything anymore. I was there to protect what we rebuilt. I didn't want to be the story anymore. I wanted to be the structure. After everything, the exile, the silence, the storm, my purpose had shifted. It wasn't about fixing the past. It was about shaping what came after me. So I started teaching. Every Friday at 8 a.m., before the chaos of deadlines and dashboards, I'd meet with the junior staff. No slides, no scripts, just stories, mistakes, lessons no spreadsheet could teach. I called it the ledger room, a nod to the old ways, but focused on the future. I mentored quietly. I watched others rise. Leah became head of compliance for the entire Eastern region. Miguel built a training protocol now used company-wide. Clara was offered a directorship and declined it, choosing instead to stay and guide the next batch of analysts. And me? I stayed in the background, present, watchful, because legacy isn't something you put your name on. It's what still works, long after you're gone. I never needed a spotlight, never chased applause. They called it a restructure. I called it a reminder that real value doesn't demand attention, it just waits. And when the noise fades, it's still standing.